What's up everybody? Welcome to my channel, B.A.M.F Fabricator. I'm Tubal Kane and today I'm going to teach you how to make $5 extra $1,000 a month with just a TIG welder. Step 1, contact your local wheel repair shop. They got people coming in there all day long that have these cracked wheels and it's seeping air out the wheel. It's very easy to go in there, tell them that you know how to weld aluminum or you know how to actually fix these aluminum wheels and your phone will be ringing off the hook. Step 2, come up with a flat rate to charge these shops whenever they call you to fix their wheel. Now I typically charge $100 per crack on any of these wheels that they send to me. Step number 3, identify the crack in the wheel. Now it's typically on the back side of the wheel going across the rim and it runs about an inch into the barrel. When identifying the crack in the wheel, you just kind of want to look around at it. You could also feel it too, but there's a pretty obvious crack right there in the wheel. This one actually has 2 cracks in it, which is pretty rare. A lot of times you're only going to have 1 crack, air is going to be seeping out of the tire. So let's go ahead and clean this and then we'll keep moving on. Step number 4 is prepping the surface of the wheel itself. So what we want to do is we want to clean off all the paint or powder coat that's on the wheel and prep it for welding. Now before we weld, we want to drill a hole right at the edge of the crack to prevent this wheel from cracking in the same spot again. After that's done, we want to cut a nice even cut across the crack and then gouge the aluminum. This is going to prevent the wheel from cracking on each side of the weld because we're going to inlay a bunch of aluminum onto that crack. And we're going to finish this off really nicely. This is how you prep the surface. And these are the tools that you're going to need. Now I use just a regular angle grinder. I really like this 3M strip disc is what they call it. This removes paint and powder coat really well. If you don't have one of these, another 36 grit roll lock, pretty simple, that'll do the job. If you don't have any of those, wire brush works every time. So what I'm doing here is I'm just removing the finish. I'm not really trying to remove any aluminum or anything like that. I'm just trying to remove most of this paint out of the way so we can get a proper weld. Now we're going to go ahead and drill a hole at the edge of the crack. I usually use a 1/4 inch drill bit to do this. Next what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut across the crack on the aluminum wheel. I usually use a die grinder with a cutoff wheel on it, nice and thin. And in order for it to not clog up your cutoff wheel, what you want to use is either simple candle wax. This is actually cutting wax, and I usually put this on my wheel and then cut into the aluminum. Another tip for you, wear a face mask or a respirator. You don't want to breathe this shit in. The reason I'm doing this here is to cut out the old crack and get rid of all that cracked aluminum that had dirt and grime built up in there. And then we're going to go ahead and gouge the aluminum on both sides of the wheel. When gouging the wheel, you probably want to use some ear protection because this can get pretty loud. You definitely want to gouge both sides of this wheel. So after you're done gouging the aluminum, what I usually do is I hit it one more time with the wire wheel just to make sure everything's super clean. Step 5, actually welding the wheel. On the edges of your gouge, you want to overlap that with aluminum and get a nice big fat bead. You want to do this nice and hot too. Make sure you have the penetration because that's always super important. This is 40-43 aluminum that usually holds up really good on these wheels. I'm going to start where we drilled that hole and I'm going to bring it all the way from here down to the lip. Okay, so when you're done welding, this is what it should look like. As you're welding, you really want to feed that aluminum into that wheel and make sure you got proper penetration. So this is what it's going to look like on the inside of the wheel. You can see I didn't get adequate penetration there on the lip, but that's okay. We could fix that because we're going to go ahead and gouge this anyway back down to the aluminum that we just put on the wheel. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, now that we're done gouging the metal, this is what it's going to look like. It's not the prettiest, but it doesn't really matter because we're just going to fill all that with aluminum anyway. Remember to really force aluminum into those cracks when you're welding on the front side. And it doesn't have to look pretty. We're not trying to stack dimes. We're just trying to make sure that we have proper penetration on this wheel. Before I start welding with any of the filler rod, I'm going to go ahead and fusion weld this backside. Make sure all the aluminum goes back together like we want it to. Okay, so what we've done now is we fusion welded this wheel and we made sure that there's no cracks left over in this aluminum whatsoever. What I like to do at this point is I like to clean it one more time with your wire wheel, and then we'll go back, put some filler rod in there. Okay, so now we just finished the welding process. I was just making sure I had enough material on here that when I grind, it's nice and even with the wheel. That way we could just make it look like, you know, it never happened. Step 6 is metal finishing. So what you want to do is you want to grind down the weld that you just put on there nice and even with the surface of the wheel on the inside and the outside. Okay, so now that we're all finished up, what you want to do is you just kind of want to go back and make sure that you can't really feel any welds or anything. If you do, go back, do that process, and just try to make it look as smooth and seamlessly as possible. After that, take it back to the wheel repair shop. They'll put the finish back on it, pay you, and then you're good to go. Alright guys, that about sums it up. Usually this process takes me about a half an hour after I get the wheel back to the shop, so you're making, you know, somewhere around $200 an hour if you have a couple of these in line, which usually I do. But yeah, hopefully you guys can find a shop that's willing to let you weld their rims. Good luck, and like, subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.